host, Dr. Sharon Cook. With over 20 years of experience in hospitality purchasing and consulting and a PhD in procurement ethics, I'm on a mission to procure smarter. ProcureSmart is a cloud-based boutique purchasing agency. Our team has experience with projects of all sizes, including conversions, renovations, and new construction. We offer dynamic customer service and competitive pricing. Reach out to us today to learn more about how ProcureSmart can purchase for your next project.
Good morning, everybody. We are going to talk to Aaron Alpeter this morning. He is the founder and principal of Izba, and he's got a take on supply chain management, logistics, and startups. So stay tuned. Okay, so first of all, pronounce for me so that I get it right the name of the company.
Yeah, so the company's name is Izba.
Izba.
Yep.
Okay, and Izba is a supply chain consulting firm specializing in startups. Is that about right?
That's right. That's right. We do supply chain consulting, outsourcing, and technology, and we build supply chains for startups.
Okay, all right. So we're going to start with talking about the current state of transportation and supply chain. So
Yeah.
why don't you give me your overview and we'll dig into it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So, it's one of these situations where there were a lot of things that were already inefficient in the marketplace prior to the pandemic happening. And then the pandemic happened and there were a lot of brittle supply chains that effectively broke. And, where we are today is a situation where there are massive shortages in some components, semiconductors being the biggest one that comes to mind that you hear a lot about. But then we're also seeing a shortage of labor, particularly unskilled labor around fulfillment and warehousing. The freight rates have never been higher. So a container that used to cost $3,000 or $4,000 to move from China to the US is now $18,000 to $20,000. And then on top of that, you have this massive shift in the overall economy and how things are handled. And so, about 20% of all sales are now done online, which is up 32% from the previous year. And so fundamentally, the world has changed. Supply chains take time to get set up. They're set up for a reason. And we're kind of in this transitory period where we are trying to figure out if things are short term, in which case you just need to bear it on the chin and do what you need to do, or if this is going to be a longer term issue for what the world's going to look like, in which case supply chains will invest and reallocate appropriately.
And what is your gut instinct telling you? Do you think this is something that will resolve itself in 9 to 12 months, or do you think this I hate to use the word the new normal, but is this our new normal in supply chain?
I think that things will get better eventually. I do believe that it will take some time to figure out what things are. I mean, the world has changed because of the pandemic. I think that everybody recognizes that. We accelerated our adoption of e-commerce by at least 10 to 15 years as a result of needing to work from home or to learn from home or to not being able to travel. And so the underlying demand has fundamentally changed. And I think that things will stabilize at some point, whether or not they stabilize at a higher cost basis, for air and ocean shipping as an example, or there's more carriers that come online, more capacity comes online, government intervention. That's yet to be seen. But I do not think that we will go back to the world that existed in 2018. I think that the world in 2023, 2024 will be different than it was in 2018, but it'll also be different from today.
Right. Now, when I was preparing for this podcast, I did a deep dive into all your media and what you have out there. And something very interesting that you had said recently was a COVID surcharge. Are you seeing that?
Oh, yeah, across the board. Everything from parcel carriers who come out and say, we're charging more money because of COVID, to fulfillment centers who have to put on a surcharge to compete for labor, to anything from advertising. You start to see where if more and more people have shifted to e-commerce, that those direct marketing channels are more competitive, and so you could say that there's a COVID surcharge in those channels as well.
Well, interesting. It reminds me a lot, I guess maybe 10 years ago when we had the freight surcharge. And my argument several years down the road was, why do we still have a freight surcharge? We don't have a gasoline issue anymore. But once those surcharges come on, manufacturers are really hesitant to let them go.
Yeah, I think I was always scratching my head when we had the fuel surcharge and freight or parcel when oil was at the lowest it had been in decades. But it was still there, and it wasn't negative.
Right. So one of the other things that you had said was buyers like myself, owners, that you don't necessarily have to accept these rate increases. So let's talk about how startups who don't normally have large volume like Amazon can still play a role in mitigating their rate increases.
Yeah, this is a question that we see all the time, and we work with a lot of different clients to do this. And it comes down to a few principles. The first one is to know what the market is doing and to know who the other players are in the market. If you only have a single provider that you are purchasing something from, whether it's a transportation service or it's a good, you have limited options, limited cards to play. However, if you are working with multiple carriers, or you are in a situation where you can afford to choose who you're going to work with, then you have leverage. There's one client that working with that they used to have one or two transportation providers, and they were always capacity constrained, meaning that they couldn't get all the deliveries done that they needed to get done. Over this past year, we grew them so that they had 6 providers, and they're no longer capacity constrained, they're now demand constrained. And as a result, not only were they able to go out and competitively bid the business, but they were able to switch to lower cost providers, and then the providers that they had, the incumbents, also were unable to push through rate increases. And so this particular client is actually saving a great deal of money in a pandemic situation because of just going through and being able to manage the market and manage those expectations.
Right. And I would imagine that thought process transcends all areas of the supply chain. It's never good to pigeonhole yourself into one supplier.
Yeah, resiliency is definitely a important principle in supply chain that we preach. I think that one of the things that the pandemic uncovered is, if you are single sourced, whether that means a provider who does transportation or fulfillment or manufacturing, if that factory or location goes down due to an outbreak, or they're deemed to be not essential, you're kind of screwed, right? And so it's good to have options. It's good to go, to know who else is out there, to have people on a short list, and to always be talking. And my general philosophy with pricing is, I usually don't negotiate on price per se. I accept people to set the pricing that they think is fair and reasonable for their end, and then I ultimately just don't give them the business. And so I don't particularly haggle and say, oh, you want it to be $25, I need it to be $15. I say, great, your price is $25. According to that price, I award you 0 business. And that usually brings people to the table, and you get their best price afterward.
Wow, that's a hard line you're taking when I've always thought, and I totally agree with you, sometimes no is your best answer. But I always try to think of, like, if price isn't bringing them to the table, is there some other commodity that we can work around?
Absolutely. I mean, the big thing about negotiations is, I see my role as a negotiator for our clients as a way to get to yes, right? And there's lots of levers beyond cash or beyond profit that they worry about.
Right.
It could be payment terms. It could be something along the lines of a longer term contract. Sometimes companies will award a lower price if they know that you're going to be a good, stable client that can help pay the light bill on an ongoing basis. So there's lots of different things that you could do. And so I think it's just important, as you are trying to negotiate, that you understand ultimately what you want out of the deal, and you understand what they want out of the deal, and you just try to find the best way to put together.
Right. So you talk to a lot of startups, and you talk obviously supply chain professionals. So what are you hearing out there? What are their major pinch points these days?
I would say universally they fall into a couple buckets. The first one is just costs are rising everywhere, particularly driven by transportation, both domestic and international. And that has to do with container availability. It has to do with port congestion. It has to do with ripple effects of some ports being shut down for a week or so a few months ago, to factories being shut down. So across the board, transportation costs are much higher than they have been historically. The other thing that we're finding is that it used to be that there was a lot of dependency, and it was a safe expectation to move your goods pretty easily. If you were moving something from Chicago to LA, you knew how long that was going to take, and that really wasn't an issue. Now we're finding it's more difficult than it has been previously to find coverage on different loads. And so, I saw a report just the other day that for every shipment that's out there, there are 6 shipments available for every driver that is out there today. That's better than what it was during the height of the pandemic, where it's about 20-1 in some markets. But it just goes to show you that it's not always a guarantee to have a driver who has something that's going on.
Right.
And then I'd say the last thing that everybody's looking at and trying to figure out is just an assumption of how long this current status quo is going to be the status quo. Do I start to move my manufacturing, say, from overseas to near shore or onshore? Do I need to be dual sourcing factories? Do I need to be changing my prices with my customers? And so there's a lot of people who are trying to figure out what they think the next 2-3 years is going to look like and act accordingly.
So do you think, so that brings a couple of things. Do you think that this push to bring manufacturing near shore or onshore, do you think we're prepared for that? And I guess the reason I asked is, we're struggling with our own labor shortage here. We're struggling with skilled labor mostly, because a lot of that manufacturing is an art that's been lost. So I'm wondering if that's going to be kind of a false hope. Oh, it's no big deal. We'll manufacture stateside. We'll manufacture Mexico. We'll manufacture Canada. But we may not be in a position to handle that.
That's a great point. I think that structurally, there's a lot of work that we need to do as a country to bring back that skilled labor as a viable career alternative for young people. And what I mean by that is, I know growing up, people were kind of looked down upon if they were blue collar, which is, I've worked with fantastic, I've worked in a factory, I've worked with some fantastic people there. And it is a great job with great people. And unfortunately, if you don't have exposure to those sorts of things, you just hear about, the dirty factory work and kind of, you read books of what it was like in the 1900s, and you just get this perception that working in a factory is not a great place where you want to be, or driving a truck is not where you want to be. I think it's important that we recognize that not everybody in the country can be an investment banker or should be an investment banker. We need people who can make things. We need people who can do things. And so I think culturally, there's a lot that we need to do to celebrate not just factory workers, but plumbers and teachers and people who are really doing the real work, in the country.
When I was in high school, and probably the same for you, the kids who took wood shop or shop class were those kids who were not expected to go on to higher education. And now I think we did a big disservice to ourselves. We undermined that skill set, and now we desperately need it.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's interesting. I have a good friend in high school who decided to go to technical school and just became a firefighter right out of high school. And he's had a fantastic career, has a fantastic life, and has a great living. And I really respect him for making that decision.
I do too. Speaking from experience, my husband is a paramedic and my son is a paramedic. And I know what it takes to do that job from being married to that into that lifestyle. And it's certainly not a job I would want to do. But you get a lot of flack for like, oh, your husband's not a lawyer, your husband's not a doctor. And I'm like, no, but my husband is, killing it. All right, well, let's talk about contract negotiations. So this is one of your specialties. And I was just, kind of curious, when you're mentoring somebody new, what advice do you give them for honing their negotiation skills? Because that very much is a learned skill.
Yeah, I think it's really important. The first thing I tell people is it's really important to understand that you're kind of both on the same team here because you want to get a deal done. There's different styles in negotiation. There are some people who pound the table. There's other people who will be super aggressive and will litigate every point. That's not what I found to be effective. I try to be very reasonable and very balanced. I heard a story once of a defense lawyer in California who was like the top lawyer in California. Sorry, I think it was a prosecutor, some sort of big, I'm going to butcher the story, but some really powerful lawyer who was number one in his field. And this person who was going to meet them just assumed that this person would be an absolute killer, just this thug of a person who could get things done. But when he met them, he was just a very warm, affectionate person, was just the kind of person that you wanted to be around. And that kind of disarmed people a little bit and allowed, he was a very smart lawyer. And so people tended to tell him stuff that he shouldn't have told them. And that helped them, win their cases. But I kind of go into that vein a little bit, where I try to really be genuine and open and honest. And, depending on the situation, say, hey guys, this is really what we care about. What do you really care about? And sometimes if I say, look, cash flow is a concern for us right now, we care less about margin, what's important for you guys. And then suddenly, it helps and people understand, okay, there is a path forward. So the first thing I would just remind people is that the people that you're negotiating with, the people you're talking to, they want to do a deal too. And, it's one of these things where there is always a path. There's different levers. Sometimes you have to be creative. But if you can understand what their problem is that they're trying to solve, and you can be honest about your problem that you're trying to solve, you can really get to a point where yes is a lot easier. The second big thing they look at is, in most cases, the contract negotiation is the beginning of a relationship. And you're going to work with these people, you're going to talk with these people much more often than you're going to on your own. After the contract is signed. And so the big thing is that you want to set the relationship off on the right tone. This doesn't mean that you have a contract that is weak. You should litigate every point that is important to you. And you should make sure that you think through all of the different things that could go wrong and make sure you have the rules for how you're going to handle things. But in many cases, I find that the beginning of this relationship allows you to pick up the phone when you need a favor. It allows them to pick up the phone when something doesn't go well. And I find that if you set off the relationship in a good term, you can have conversations with your partner where even though the contract says that you're going to pay in 30 days, they're going to let you pay in 45 days for a certain period of time because they trust you, right? Because they understand that piece of it. And so I think it's important to kind of look at that and try to find a balanced agreement. If you set the tone off initially where it's confrontational and adversarial, that'll be a difficult thing. And then the final thing I'd say is just always have an attorney look at the contract because there are legal terms in there that you just need an attorney to look at.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Let's talk about partner management, which is a term that I found on your website. Tell me a little bit about what partner management means. And then let's talk about how you recommend clients build and maintain those partnerships.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what we just talked about with contracts, but the basic idea is that there are entities that exist in your ecosystem that you need to have a successful business. And I think recognizing who those people are and recognizing, you know, the value that they bring is the first step. Now, I also think that you have to look at these partners and understand that there is a lifespan to each of them, right? The company that maybe made your first 100 units or got you launched may not be the right company to make 1,000,000 units. And so there are you know, times and seasons for every relationship, and that goes, you know, with employees, consultants, factories, fulfillment centers, and I think it's just important that you understand where those natural boundaries are, and then as you're doing your internal planning, and you're doing what we call S&OP planning, which is trying to have a informed view of what you think the next 18 to 24 months look like. You start to say, okay, based on my expected growth trajectory, my fulfillment center today can handle 1,000 units a day. If I look out 18 months from now, I'm projecting to do 5,000 units a day. So the first step with partner management would be to acknowledge that, and then to share that forecast with the partner and say, hey, this is, I think, what's coming. Do you think you could handle this? And they may say, yeah, we'll hire more people, we'll invest in more lines, we'll do all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, you need to talk to them about that, but then also be making the decision for your side, because everybody wants to do a good job. Nobody wants to fail. And sometimes you have to be willing to say, you know what, this has been a great relationship. We are going to move some of our volume elsewhere. We're going to still keep you in the ecosystem. We're going to think about these things. But it's one of these ideas of understanding when you need to grow and when you need to leave. And then I would say always leaving the door open. So making sure that you know, when you do exit a partner, that you do so in the best way possible, because you never know when that next project is going to show up, or you never know when you're going to switch companies or they're going to switch companies, and you're going to want to get. So partnership management is really relationship management, and I think it comes down to who you are as a person, who you are as a company, and trying to do everything ethically and objectively.
It's fantastic. I actually did my doctoral study on buyer-supplier relationship building techniques around the globe, and I thought it was fascinating. So yeah, that's right up my alley.
Yeah, what sorts of things did you learn through that?
You know, I learned that it really didn't matter what country you were in. You know, there were some similar techniques. You know, it's about building a personal relationship. You know, it's about trying to find a personal level connection. And a lot of times, you know, people will come in and they'll ask about your family, and they'll try to find something on a level that, you know, that will build a feeling of warmth and camaraderie. But you know, but then there are other countries where it's very transactional. You give to me, I give to you. You give to me, I give to you. So I thought it was really interesting. And I guess to some degree, even in the stateside, it's transactional, right? You know, a lunch and learn is never really free. There's always something on the other side of that.
Yeah, I've noticed a big difference just in the microculture between New York and say Charlotte, North Carolina, where we just moved. Great people, you know, both very different. I think the key thing of being able to do business in both of those cultures, not just New York and Charlotte, but just globally, is to be genuine and to try to be aware of those different dependencies.
Right. Agreed. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for doing this. If somebody would like to reach out to you, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, best way is email. My email is aaron@izba.co, aaron@izba.co.
Great. All right. Aaron, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you very much for doing this, Aaron. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Procure Smarter podcast. If you're enjoying our show, don't forget to follow us on Spotify and leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. If you do, we'll shout you out on our next episode. We're currently interviewing guests for season 2 of Procure Smarter, dropping next spring. If you've got a take on the hospitality and purchasing industry, we'd love to hear it. For interest in being a guest, you can reach out to us at our website, LinkedIn, or Instagram. For all Procure Smarter episodes, find us on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen. For service inquiries, please reach out to us at our website, procuresmartco.com. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Procure Smarter podcast.